The crack of a gunshot echoed through the canyon, silencing every living creature for miles around, except for Bridget Vallory, who kept her gaze fixed on the dusty trail ahead, as if death itself weren't stalking her through the Colorado wilderness. The year was 1872, and her journey to Fort Lyon had already cost her everything but the clothes on her back and the will to survive. Bridget pulled her worn shawl tighter around her shoulders, the late autumn wind carrying the promise of an early winter. The stagecoach had abandoned her 10 miles back after an axle broke, the driver assuring her Fort Lyon was just over yonder before he and the other passengers continued on horseback. At 30 years old, with no husband and no family waiting for her, Bridget wasn't worth the extra trouble of sharing a horse. She'd come west chasing a teaching position that promised a fresh start, away from the whispers and stares of Philadelphia society. 5 years, a widow was long enough to mourn, they said, but not long enough to forget the scandal that drove her husband to the bottle and eventually to his grave. The wind picked up, whipping her chestnut hair across her face. She tucked the loose strands back into her bun and adjusted her grip on her carpet bag. As she crested the hill, her heart leapt at the sight of buildings in the distance. Fort Lyon at last. The settlement was larger than she expected, a proper town grown up around the military outpost. Bridget's steps quickened as she approached the main street, lined with establishments typical of a frontier town. A general store, a saloon, a small church, and various other businesses. "Madam, you look like you could use some assistance." The deep voice came from her left, startling her. Bridget turned to find a tall man with broad shoulders and kind eyes the color of a summer sky. He sat atop a magnificent chestnut mare, his hat tipped back to reveal sun-bronzed skin and hair the color of wheat. A silver star gleamed on his vest. "Sheriff Owen Hawkins, madam." "Just call me Owen." He dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his impressive height. "You look like you've been walking a while." "Bridget Vallory," she replied, extending her gloved hand. "The stagecoach broke down several miles back. I'm the new schoolteacher." Recognition flashed in his eyes. "Miss Vallory, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow. The town council sent riders to escort you in. I'm afraid we made better time than expected until the accident." She attempted a smile, though her lips cracked painfully from thirst. "Let me get you settled." He took her carpetbag with one hand and offered his other arm. "Mrs. Peterson at the boarding house has your room ready. You must be exhausted." As they walked down the main street, Bridget felt curious eyes tracking their progress. Fort Lyon was clearly a town where newcomers were noteworthy. "The school's just up that way," Owen pointed toward a modest wooden building at the edge of town. 27 students at last count, ages 6 to 16. 27, Bridget's step faltered. The letter mentioned 15. Owen chuckled. "Word spread to the outlying farms that we were getting a proper teacher from back east. Families are sending children who haven't had schooling in years." A mixture of pride and anxiety fluttered in Bridget's chest. "I'll do my best not to disappoint them, I've no doubt." His confidence was reassuring. The boarding house was a 2-story structure with a wide porch and fresh paint, a sign of prosperity in this frontier town. A plump woman with silver-streaked hair bustled out to greet them. "Land sakes, Sheriff, is this our teacher?" "You poor dear, you look half dead on your feet, Mrs. Peterson. This is Miss Vallory," Owen introduced. "Bridget, please," she insisted. "Well, Bridget, I'm Martha Peterson. Let's get you inside. I've got stew on and fresh bread cooling." The mention of food made Bridget's stomach growl audibly. She blushed as Owen smiled. "I'll leave you in capable hands," he said, setting down her bag. "I hope to see you at church on Sunday, Miss Vallory. Thank you for your kindness, Sheriff." "Owen," he corrected with a gentle smile that transformed his face, softening the hard lines earned from years under the harsh western sun. As he walked away, Martha Peterson guided Bridget inside with a knowing look. "Fine man, our sheriff, widowed these past 3 years with twin boys to raise. Does a remarkable job for a man on his own." Bridget merely nodded, too tired to properly respond to the obvious matchmaking. In that moment, all she wanted was food, water, and rest in that order. Tomorrow would be soon enough to think about anything else, including handsome sheriffs with kind eyes. After a hearty meal and a hot bath, Bridget fell into the first real bed she'd seen in weeks and slept the dreamless sleep of the truly exhausted. Morning came with golden light streaming through lace curtains and the smell of coffee and bacon. Bridget dressed in her best navy skirt and white shirtwaist, pinning her hair in a neat bun at the nape of her neck. Today, she would meet the town council and see her school for the first time. Breakfast at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house was a lively affair with 4 other boarders: the telegraph operator, a young banker, the church organist, and a widow who worked at the general store. They peppered Bridget with questions about Philadelphia and the journey west, all while passing platters of eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy. "Council meets at 10, Mrs. Peterson informed her. "Mayor Danvers is looking forward to meeting you. His daughter Rachel will be one of your students." At 9:30, Bridget left the boarding house and headed toward the town hall. Fort Lyon was bustling with morning activity. Wagons delivering goods, women shopping, cowboys riding through on various errands. She took it all in, noting the mix of rough frontier elements and the seeds of civilization taking root. A commotion caught her attention: raised voices and the sound of running feet. 2 young boys tore around the corner of the general store, nearly colliding with her. They were identical in appearance, with wheat blonde hair and eyes the color of the summer sky, so similar to those she'd noticed the day before that she immediately knew whose children they were. "Give it back," one boy shouted, lunging for something clutched in his brother's hands. "It's mine now." The other retorted, dodging the grab. "Boys." A familiar deep voice called out, stopping them in their tracks. Sheriff Hawkins strode toward them, his expression stern but not angry. "What have I told you about running in town?" "Sorry, Pa," they mumbled in unison. "Miss Vallory," Owen tipped his hat to her, "I apologize for my sons nearly trampling you. Samuel, Thomas, introduce yourselves to your new teacher." The boys, who looked to be about 8 years old, shuffled their feet and stared at the ground. "Samuel Hawkins, madam," one said. "Thomas Hawkins, madam," echoed the other. "I'm pleased to meet you both," Bridget said warmly. "I look forward to seeing you in school." "Yes, madam," they replied, still not meeting her eyes. Owen gave them a stern look. "Now, what's this argument about?" Samuel, still clutching something to his chest, glanced at his brother. "Tommy says it's his turn with the soldier, but Grandpa Wallace gave it to me special." "He gave it to us both," Thomas protested, "and you've had it for 3 whole days." The object in question, Bridget now saw, was a carved wooden soldier, about 6 inches tall and painted in bright colors. "It seems to me," Owen began, but was interrupted by the town clock striking 10. "I'm afraid I must go," Bridget said, reluctant to leave the interesting tableau. "The council is expecting me," Owen nodded. "Of course, boys, we'll finish this discussion at home." He turned back to Bridget. "Good luck with the council, Miss Vallory. Mayor Danvers can be particular." Bridget hurried to the town hall, wondering about the story behind the sheriff and his sons. Widowed, Mrs. Peterson had said. The twins would have been quite young when they lost their mother. No wonder they were so attached to a toy from their grandfather. It represented a connection to family beyond just their father. The meeting with the town council went well, despite Mayor Danvers' lengthy interrogation about her teaching methods and moral character. By noon, Bridget had been officially welcomed to Fort Lyon and given a tour of her schoolhouse by the mayor himself. The building was simple but well constructed, with rows of desks facing a larger teacher's desk on a raised platform. A blackboard covered one wall, and a small wood stove sat in the corner for the approaching winter months. Bookshelves lined another wall, though they held pitifully few volumes. "We've ordered more books," Mayor Danvers explained, "but deliveries are unpredictable. The town has allocated funds for supplies as well." "Thank you," Bridget said sincerely. "I've brought some of my own books and teaching materials." "I believe strongly in the power of literature to expand young minds." The mayor harumphed but nodded. "School starts Monday next. That gives you a few days to prepare and settle in." He handed her a heavy iron key. "The school is yours, Miss Vallory. Don't disappoint us." Left alone, Bridget walked slowly around the room, imagining it filled with children eager to learn. This was her domain now, her chance to build something meaningful. After the scandal and loss in Philadelphia, she'd never imagined finding such purpose again. She was arranging her books on the shelves when the door creaked open. Owen Hawkins stood in the doorway, his imposing frame nearly filling it. "Miss Vallory, I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, Sheriff. Please come in." He stepped inside, hat in hand, looking somewhat uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize again for the boys this morning, and I wondered if I might speak with you about them." "Of course." She gestured to one of the student desks, which looked comically small as he folded his long frame into it. "Samuel and Thomas are good boys," he began, "but they've had it rough since their mother passed. They were just 5 then. Caroline, my wife, she was everything to them, to all of us." His voice softened on his late wife's name, and Bridget felt a pang of sympathy. "I understand loss, Sheriff," she said quietly. "My husband passed 5 years ago." His eyes met hers, recognition of shared grief passing between them. "I'm sorry for your loss, as I am for yours." She sat at a desk across from him. "Your boys seem spirited but well-mannered." "They have their moments." A small smile tugged at his lips. "They're smart as whips but not always interested in book learning. I'm hoping you might change that." "I'll certainly try." "About that toy they were fighting over, it's a soldier their grandfather carved, Caroline's father. He passed last winter, and it's one of the few things they have to remember him by. I should have had him make 2, but—" He trailed off, regret evident in his voice. "It's a difficult situation," Bridget acknowledged. "Have you considered having them take turns with it, perhaps a formal schedule?" "Tried that. They still fight over whose turn it is." He sighed heavily. "I know it seems a small matter, but with boys so alike in every way, they cling to anything that might be just theirs." An idea began to form in Bridget's mind. "Perhaps I could speak with them. Not as their teacher yet, but as someone who might understand their situation better than they realize." Owen's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You do that?" "I would." She smiled warmly. "I had brothers who fought like cats and dogs over everything under the sun. Perhaps my experience might help." For the first time since she'd met him, Owen Hawkins smiled fully, transforming his face from handsome to breathtaking. "Miss Vallory, I would be most grateful. Would you join us for supper tonight? Our housekeeper, Mrs. Rivera, makes an excellent beef stew." "I would be delighted," she replied, ignoring the flutter in her chest at his smile. "And please call me Bridget." "Bridget," he repeated, the name sounding different in his deep voice. "Thank you." As the sheriff left, Bridget returned to organizing her books, her mind now occupied with thoughts of twin boys, a wooden soldier, and the widowed father whose smile made her forget, if just for a moment, the weight of her own past. That evening, Bridget found herself standing on the porch of a modest, but well-maintained 2-story house at the edge of town. She smoothed her skirt nervously before knocking, uncertain why the prospect of dinner with the sheriff and his sons made her pulse quicken. The door opened to reveal a middle-aged Mexican woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Miss Vallory, I am Rosa Rivera. Please come in." Inside, the home was surprisingly cozy. Handmade quilts draped over furniture, landscape paintings hung on walls, and bookshelves held an impressive collection of volumes. It wasn't what she expected from a bachelor household. "The sheriff's wife had a good eye," Rosa explained, noting Bridget's interest in the decor. "I try to keep things as she left them, for the boys." A clatter of footsteps announced the twins' arrival as they tumbled down the stairs, followed at a more dignified pace by their father. Owen had exchanged his sheriff's attire for simpler clothing, a clean white shirt and dark trousers, but he looked no less imposing. "Miss Vallory," the boys chorused, clearly having been coached on manners. "Good evening, Samuel, Thomas," she greeted them, noting subtle differences now that she saw them up close. Samuel's hair curled slightly at the temples, while Thomas had a small freckle near his right eye. "Thank you for coming," Owen said, gesturing toward the dining room. "I hope you don't mind, but I told the boys you might have a story for them after supper." "I'd be happy to share," she confirmed as they moved to the table, already set with mismatched but fine china. Supper was a lively affair. The boys, initially reserved, soon warmed up and peppered Bridget with questions about Philadelphia, her journey west, and what they would learn in school. Owen mostly observed, interjecting occasionally to rein in their enthusiasm or elaborate on town matters. "Did you really cross Indian territory?" Thomas asked, eyes wide. "I did," Bridget confirmed. "The stagecoach was escorted by cavalry for that section of the journey." "Did you see any Indians?" Samuel leaned forward eagerly. "Samuel," Owen warned. "It's all right," Bridget assured him. "Yes, Samuel, I did see some native people, though from a distance. The driver said they were Cheyenne." "Were you scared?" Thomas pressed. Bridget considered the question honestly. "I was nervous about many things on my journey, but the Native Americans were not chief among them. I was more afraid of bandits or the coach overturning on mountain passes." The conversation continued through helpings of excellent stew, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. By the time they moved to the sitting room, Bridget felt as if she'd known the Hawkins family for much longer than a day. "Now," Owen said as they settled in, the boys on the floor at Bridget's feet, "I believe Miss Vallory has a story that might interest you too. Is it about Indians?" Samuel asked hopefully, "Or train robbers," Thomas added. "Actually," Bridget smiled, "it's about two brothers who fought over a toy." The twins exchanged glances, immediately understanding the relevance. "These brothers were my own," she continued. "Charles and Daniel were twins, just like you, though not identical. They were 4 years apart in age, with Charles being the elder." "What did they fight over?" Thomas asked, skeptically. "A wooden horse that had belonged to our father when he was a boy. Our grandmother had saved it, and when my brothers were about your age, she gave it to them. To both of them." Samuel perked up. "Yes, to share, but sharing is difficult, especially when something is precious." Bridget glanced at Owen, who was watching her intently. "Charles claimed it should be his because he was older. Daniel said that wasn't fair because he never got anything first." The boys nodded in understanding, clearly familiar with such arguments. Their fighting got so bad that one day, Daniel took the horse and hid it where Charles couldn't find it. Charles was furious and refused to speak to Daniel for days. She leaned forward. "Can you guess what happened next? Your pa whooped them both," Samuel suggested. Bridget laughed. "No, though he was tempted. Instead, my mother took them aside and told them a story about how she and her sister had once fought over a doll. She explained that the fighting had made them both miserable and eventually damaged the doll beyond repair. Neither of them got to enjoy it." "What did your brothers do?" Thomas asked, clearly invested now. "They thought about it and decided to try something new. They created a calendar together, marking whose day it was to have the horse. On Sundays, they would play with it together, creating grand adventures. Did it work?" Samuel's voice was skeptical. "For a while," Bridget admitted. "But then something unexpected happened. Our father, seeing how much they both loved the wooden horse, carved a companion for it, a wooden soldier who could ride on its back. Suddenly, their play became collaborative. The horse and soldier needed each other for their adventures." Owen's eyes lit with understanding, and he nodded slightly. "But the most important part," Bridget continued, "was that my brothers discovered something through their fighting and resolution. They realized that neither the horse nor the soldier was as important as their relationship as brothers. The toys were just that, toys, but brothers are forever." The twins sat quietly, absorbing her words. Finally, Samuel spoke. "Pa said your brothers fought like we do. Did they ever stop?" Bridget smiled sadly. "They had their disagreements as they grew older, but they remained close until—" She paused, memories of loss threatening to overwhelm her. "Until they both enlisted in the war. Charles didn't come home." The room fell silent. Even young as they were, the twins understood the weight of her words. The war between the states had ended only 7 years prior, and its shadow still loomed large over the nation. "Is Daniel still alive?" Thomas asked softly. "No," Bridget whispered. "He survived the war but fell ill 2 winters ago." She hadn't meant to share so much of her personal tragedy, but the innocent question demanded truth. Owen cleared his throat. "Boys, I think it's time you thanked Miss Vallory for her story and readied yourselves for bed." They stood obediently, but before they could leave, Bridget spoke again. "Would you like to know what happened to the wooden horse and soldier?" They nodded eagerly. "My brother Daniel gave them to me before he passed. He said that someday I might meet children who would appreciate them as much as he and Charles had." She met Owen's gaze. I brought them with me. They're among my most treasured possessions. Could we see them sometime? Samuel asked. Perhaps, Bridget smiled. If you can demonstrate that you understand the lesson my brothers learned. The twins promised they would try, then bid her good night before heading upstairs with Rosa to supervise their bedtime routine. Left alone with Owen, Bridget felt suddenly self-conscious. I apologize if I overstepped. I hadn't intended to make the story quite so personal. Don't apologize. His voice was gentle. Your story touched them. I could see it in their eyes. He hesitated, then added, I'm sorry for your losses. That's a heavy burden to carry alone. As is yours, she replied softly. Raising two boys without their mother, he nodded, a flash of pain crossing his features. Caroline would have loved you. She was always saying Fort Lyon needed a proper teacher. His smile returned, though tinged with sadness. She'd have been first in line to welcome you. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. He stood, moving to a small cabinet where he poured 2 small glasses of amber liquid. May I? It's not proper, perhaps, but after such memories. Bridget accepted the glass. Thank you. And propriety seems less important than kindness in this moment. They sipped in companionable silence for a few minutes before Owen spoke again. Would you really consider showing the boys those toys? It might help them understand about their soldier. I would, she confirmed. Though I'd like to see if your suggestion takes root first. My suggestion, about a companion for the soldier, a horse perhaps, she smiled. Every good soldier needs a mount, understanding dawned in his eyes. Miss Vallory, Bridget, you are as wise as you are kind. The warmth in his gaze sent a pleasant flutter through her chest. Hardly wise, just experienced in the ways of brotherly squabbles. Owen walked her back to the boarding house, despite her protests that it wasn't necessary. The night was clear, stars splashed across the velvet sky in quantities she'd never seen in Philadelphia. Thank you again, he said as they reached Mrs. Peterson's front porch. Not just for tonight, but for coming to Fort Lyon. The town needs someone like you. Someone like me. Someone with heart, intelligence, compassion. He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. Someone who understands that life goes on, even after great loss. Their eyes met in the moonlight, and Bridget felt something shift between them, a recognition of kindred spirits. Good night, Sheriff Hawkins, she said softly. Good night, Miss Vallory. He tipped his hat and waited until she was safely inside before turning back toward home. Sunday arrived clear and crisp, with frost riming the edges of windows and grass crackling underfoot. Bridget wore her best dress, a deep green wool that complemented her chestnut hair, and walked with Mrs. Peterson to the small white church at the center of town. The congregation was larger than she expected, with families from outlying farms joining the townspeople. She recognized many faces from her brief time in Fort Lyon, including Mayor Danvers and his wife, the general store proprietor, and several other merchants. Owen and the twins arrived just as the service was beginning. The boys, scrubbed clean and wearing matching suits that were slightly too small, spotted her immediately and waved enthusiastically. Owen, handsome in a dark suit and string tie, offered a more dignified nod. After the service, the congregation lingered to socialize. Bridget found herself surrounded by mothers eager to meet their children's new teacher. She answered questions about her teaching philosophy and background, all while aware of Owen watching from across the churchyard. Miss Vallory, a familiar voice called. Samuel appeared at her elbow, his brother trailing behind him. Pa says to ask if you'd join us for Sunday dinner. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose, please. Thomas looked up at her with hopeful eyes. Mrs. Rivera made chicken and dumplings, and we have something to show you. Curiosity piqued, Bridget agreed, much to the obvious interest of the watching townspeople. She caught Mrs. Peterson's knowing smile and felt her cheeks warm. The Hawkins home was even more welcoming in daylight. Rosa greeted them with a warm smile before returning to the kitchen, and the boys immediately dragged Bridget to the sitting room. Look what Pa made. Samuel pointed proudly to a small wooden horse standing on the mantelpiece beside the soldier they had been fighting over. The new toy was expertly carved and painted to match the soldier's uniform colors. Your father made this. Bridget picked up the horse, admiring the craftsmanship. Each detail was perfect, from the flowing mane to the tiny saddle. He stayed up all night, Thomas confided. We could hear him working in the shed. Owen appeared in the doorway, looking slightly embarrassed. I used to do a fair bit of woodworking before Caroline passed. Haven't touched my tools much since then. It's beautiful, Bridget said sincerely. A perfect companion for the soldier. We decided Samuel gets the soldier and I get the horse, Thomas explained. But we can play together with them both. That sounds like an excellent solution, she smiled. Your grandfather would be proud of how you've resolved this. That's what Pa said too, Samuel nodded solemnly. Dinner was a joyous affair, with the twins chattering excitedly about school starting the next day and peppering Bridget with questions about what they would learn. Owen mostly listened, his eyes warm whenever they met Bridget's across the table. After the meal, while Rosa cleared the dishes, Owen invited Bridget to see the garden Caroline had planted. It was dormant now in late autumn, but he spoke with such fondness of the summer flowers and vegetables that Bridget could almost see them blooming. You must miss her terribly, she said as they walked back toward the house. Every day, he admitted, but it's different now than it was at first. The pain isn't as sharp. He glanced at her. You understand? I do, she hesitated, then added, though my situation was complicated. Edward and I weren't as happy as you and Caroline seem to have been. I'm sorry to hear that. It was my fault in many ways. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. We couldn't have children. After years of trying, doctors confirmed I would never bear a child. Edward couldn't accept it. He turned to drink, then to other women. She looked away, ashamed. When he died, there was as much relief as grief. Owen's hand covered hers where it rested on the garden gate. That wasn't your fault, Bridget. Not being able to have children doesn't make you less of a woman, and it certainly didn't give your husband the right to betray you. Tears pricked her eyes at his kindness. That's a rare perspective, especially out here where large families are the norm. Perhaps, he conceded. But I've seen enough in this life to know that family comes in many forms. Look at us, the boys. Rosa, we're a family cobbled together by circumstance and held together by love. You're fortunate, she said softly. I know it. His hand remained on hers, warm and steady. And I hope you might consider being part of our extended family here in Fort Lyon. The boys already adore you. And their father? The question slipped out before she could reconsider its boldness. Owen's eyes widened slightly, then crinkled with his smile. Their father finds himself thinking about the new schoolteacher far more than is probably proper. A thrill ran through her at his admission. Propriety is overrated, Sheriff Hawkins. So I'm beginning to believe, Miss Vallory. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility, until shouts from inside broke the spell. I should go, Bridget said reluctantly. I have final preparations for tomorrow, of course. Owen walked her to the front door. May I call on you properly sometime, perhaps next Saturday evening? I'd like that very much. As she walked back to the boarding house, Bridget felt lighter than she had in years. Fort Lyon, it seemed, held promise beyond just professional fulfillment. Monday morning dawned bright and cold. Bridget arrived at the schoolhouse early, lighting the stove and arranging books and slates. Her stomach fluttered with nervous excitement as she wrote her name on the blackboard in large, flowing script. Miss Vallory. The children began arriving at 7:30, some from town walking on their own, others dropped off by parents eager to meet the new teacher. By 8 o'clock, 27 students ranging from shy 6-year-olds to gangly teenagers filled the desks. Samuel and Thomas arrived with their father, who tipped his hat to her from the doorway before continuing on to his duties as sheriff. The twins took seats near the front, their excitement palpable. Good morning, Bridget addressed the class once everyone had settled. I am Miss Vallory, and I am honored to be your teacher. Before we begin our lessons, I'd like each of you to stand, state your name, age, and one thing you hope to learn this year. The introductions revealed a diverse group. Farmers' children with limited previous education, merchants' offspring with more formal schooling, and a few like Mayor Danvers' daughter who had been tutored at home. Despite their differences, all seemed eager to learn. Now, Bridget said once introductions were complete, I believe education should be both rigorous and joyful. We will work hard in this classroom, but we will also find wonder in what we learn. Does that sound agreeable? A chorus of yes, Miss Vallory filled the room. Excellent. Let us begin with reading. I notice many of you brought McGuffey readers of various levels. Those who don't have one may share for today, and we'll arrange to get the rest by week's end. The morning passed in a flurry of assessments as Bridget determined each student's reading and arithmetic levels. By lunchtime, she had a clear picture of the educational needs facing her and the challenges. Some of the older students had significant gaps in their knowledge, while a few of the younger ones were surprisingly advanced. As the children ate their packed lunches in the schoolyard, Bridget remained at her desk, making notes for lesson plans. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Hope I'm not disturbing you," Owen said, standing in the doorway with a small basket. "Rosa insisted I bring you lunch since you probably didn't have time to prepare anything." "That's incredibly thoughtful," Bridget said, genuinely touched. "Please thank her for me. How's the first day going?" He set the basket on her desk, revealing a sandwich, an apple, and a small jar of lemonade. "Busy but good. Your boys are bright there, both reading above their age level," pride shone in Owen's eyes. "Caroline taught them their letters before she passed." "I've tried to continue, but I'm not much of a teacher." "You've done well," she assured him. "They're eager learners." A commotion from the schoolyard drew their attention, raised voices and the sound of a scuffle. Owen moved quickly to the window, Bridget right behind him. In the yard, Thomas and Samuel were engaged in a shoving match with an older boy nearly twice their size. Without a word, Owen strode out the door, Bridget following close behind. "Enough," Owen's voice boomed across the yard, freezing the children in place. "What's going on here?" "He said we were babies for playing with toys," Samuel accused, pointing at the older boy Jason Danvers, the mayor's 14-year-old son. "And that Pa only made the horse because he feels sorry for us not having a ma," Thomas added, angry tears in his eyes. Jason had the grace to look ashamed under the sheriff's stern gaze. "I was just funning with them, Sheriff. They took it too serious." "Bullying isn't funning, Jason," Owen said firmly, "and commenting on another's family situation is never appropriate." Bridget stepped forward. "I think we all need to remember that respecting each other is the first rule of this schoolroom, whether we're inside or out." She looked at each boy in turn. "Samuel, Thomas, using physical force isn't the way to handle unkind words. And Jason, words can hurt as much as fists. All three of you will stay after school to discuss this further." The boys nodded sullenly, and the other children, who had gathered to watch the confrontation, slowly dispersed as Bridget rang the bell to signal the end of lunch period. Owen gave her an appreciative look. "Thank you for handling that so evenly. I should get back to my rounds." "Enjoy your lunch," he added quietly, just for her, before walking away. The afternoon classes went smoothly, though Bridget could sense tension between the Hawkins twins and Jason Danvers. When the final bell rang, most students rushed out, eager to enjoy what remained of the daylight. Only the three boys remained behind, as instructed. "Now," Bridget said, sitting in a student desk to be at eye level with them, "let's talk about what happened today." Jason spoke first, surprisingly contrite. "I'm sorry, Miss Vallory, what I said was mean. My pa would tan my hide if he knew." "And why was it mean?" she pressed. The boy squirmed uncomfortably. "Because their ma died and it's not something to make fun of." "That's right," Bridget nodded. "We all have our struggles, Jason. Compassion is always better than cruelty." She turned to the twins. "And you too. What could you have done differently?" "Told you instead of pushing him," Samuel admitted. "Or just walked away," Thomas added. "Excellent suggestions." "Violence rarely solves problems, it usually creates more." She regarded all three boys seriously. "I expect better behavior from all of you. Jason, you'll write a letter of apology to Samuel and Thomas. Twins, you'll each write a paragraph about peaceful conflict resolution." The assignments were met with groans but no real protest. Bridget dismissed them with a reminder to have their work ready by morning. As the boys left, she noticed Owen waiting outside, clearly having arrived to walk his sons home. He waved at her through the window, and she found herself waving back with perhaps more enthusiasm than was strictly professional. The rest of the week passed in a blur of lessons, getting to know her students, and settling into the rhythm of Fort Lyon. Bridget quickly became a respected figure in town, with parents stopping her on the street to discuss their children's progress or thank her for her dedication. By Saturday, she was exhausted but exhilarated. Teaching had always been her passion, and having her own classroom of eager minds fulfilled her in ways she hadn't experienced since before Edward's descent into alcoholism. That evening, as promised, Owen called at the boarding house, dressed in his Sunday best despite it being Saturday. Mrs. Peterson practically beamed as she showed him to the parlor where Bridget waited. "You look beautiful," he said sincerely, taking in her blue dress with its modest lace collar. "Thank you," she replied, feeling suddenly shy. "You're quite handsome yourself." Owen offered his arm. "I thought we might have dinner at the hotel restaurant. It's the closest thing Fort Lyon has to fine dining." "That sounds lovely." The evening was everything a proper courtship outing should be. Good food, pleasant conversation, and the warmth of mutual attraction growing with every shared story and laugh. Owen spoke of his childhood in Ohio, his journey west after the war, and meeting Caroline when she nursed him through a bullet wound received in the line of duty. Bridget shared stories of Philadelphia, her teaching experiences, and her brother's antics before the war tore their family apart. "You're remarkable," Owen said as they walked back to the boarding house under a canopy of stars, "to have endured so much loss and still have such compassion for others." "I could say the same of you," she replied. "Raising two spirited boys alone while serving as sheriff can't be easy." "It has its challenges," he admitted, "but Rosa is a godsend and the boys are good at heart." He paused on Mrs. Peterson's porch. "Bridget, I know it's forward of me, but I've never met anyone like you, these past days, knowing you were in town, seeing you with the boys." "It's awakened feelings I thought died with Caroline," her heart quickened. "Owen, you don't need to say anything," he hastened to add. "I know it's too soon. I just wanted you to know that when if you're ready to consider a future that includes more than just teaching, I hope you'll think of me." "Of us," Bridget found herself reaching for his hand. "I already am." The admission hung in the air between them, both shocking and liberating in its honesty. Owen's eyes darkened, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he raised her hand to his lips and brushed a gentle kiss across her knuckles. "Good night, Bridget." "Good night, Owen." As autumn progressed toward winter, Bridget found herself increasingly integrated into the life of Fort Lyon. Her students thrived under her guidance, parents praised her methods, and the town council voted to increase the school's budget for books and supplies. Her relationship with Owen deepened as well. Sunday dinners at the Hawkins home became a regular occurrence, and Owen often walked her home from school when his duties allowed. They maintained propriety in public, but the town's gossips had already decided the sheriff and the schoolteacher were courting. Samuel and Thomas, initially wary of sharing their father's attention, had come to adore Bridget. They often lingered after school to help clean the classroom or to show her their latest wooden toys, as Owen had resumed his carving hobby with enthusiasm. One crisp November afternoon, as the first snow of the season dusted the ground, Bridget stayed late to prepare for the upcoming Christmas pageant. The sound of the door opening made her look up, expecting to see Owen. Instead, Samuel stood there alone, his expression troubled. "Samuel. Is everything all right? Where's your brother?" "At home with a cold," he replied, scuffing his boot against the floor. "Pa's out of town until tomorrow, and I needed to ask you something important." "Of course." She set aside her work. "What is it? Do you love my pa?" The directness of the question startled her. "That's quite personal, Samuel. I know, but it's important." His young face was serious beyond his years. "Because he loves you, I heard him tell Mrs. Rivera, and Tommy and me, we was wondering if maybe you might want to be our ma someday." Bridget's heart stuttered in her chest. "Samuel, that's something your father and I would need to discuss, but do you love him?" the boy persisted. "Because if you don't, you should tell him now. He was real sad for a long time after our real ma died. I don't want him sad again." The simple concern in the child's voice moved her deeply. "Samuel, I care very much for your father and for you and Thomas, more than I ever expected to. So you might want to be our ma someday." Hope shone in his eyes so like his father's. "I might," she admitted softly. If your father asks, and if you and Thomas would truly welcome it. Samuel's face split into a grin. We would, we talked about it already. Tommy said you tell better stories than Pa, and I said you make him smile more than anybody. You're very observant, Bridget said, touched by the boy's acceptance. So when Pa gets back tomorrow, are you going to tell him you love him? Samuel Hawkins, she exclaimed, though without real admonishment. These things take time and happen in their own way. Grown-ups make everything complicated, he sighed dramatically. If you love someone, you should just say so. Out of the mouths of babes, Bridget thought. Perhaps you're right. Now, shouldn't you be getting back to check on your brother? Mrs. Rivera will worry. Yes, madam. He hesitated at the door. Miss Vallory. For Christmas, Tommy and me want a ma more than any other present, just so you know. With that parting statement, he dashed away, leaving Bridget stunned and emotional. The simple, honest desire of the twins tugged at her heart in ways she hadn't anticipated. That night, she could barely sleep, Samuel's words echoing in her mind. Did she love Owen Hawkins? The answer, she realized, was unequivocally yes. In the short time she'd known him, he had awakened feelings she thought long dead. His integrity, his devotion to his sons, his quiet strength all had combined to breach the walls she'd built around her heart after Edward's betrayal and death. And the twins, bright, energetic Samuel and thoughtful, sensitive Thomas had worked their way into her affections just as thoroughly as their father. The possibility of being a mother to them filled a void she'd long accepted as permanent. The next morning, snow fell in earnest, blanketing Fort Lyon in pristine white. Bridget canceled school for the day, knowing many students from outlying farms would be unable to make the journey. Instead, she spent the morning writing Christmas pageant parts and planning lessons. A knock at the schoolhouse door interrupted her work. She opened it to find Owen, snow dusting his hat and shoulders, his cheeks ruddy from cold. Owen, I thought you weren't returning until this afternoon. I rode through the night, he explained, stamping snow from his boots as he entered. Didn't want to get caught in this storm. He removed his hat, revealing tousled hair and tired eyes. The boys said you canceled school. The roads from the farms are likely impassable, she confirmed. Is Thomas feeling better? Much, just a slight cold. He approached her desk, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. Bridget, there's something I need to speak with you about, her heart quickened. Yes, Samuel came to see me this morning very early. He said he'd spoken to you yesterday about certain matters. Heat bloomed in her cheeks. He did. He's quite the advocate for his father. And apparently a terrible secret keeper, Owen said with a wry smile. He informed me, and I quote, Miss Vallory loves you back, Pa, so you should just ask her already. Bridget covered her face with her hands. Oh my goodness. I apologize for his directness, Owen continued, moving closer. But I find myself hoping there's some truth to his statement. She lowered her hands, meeting his gaze. There is. The word hung in the air between them, a simple affirmation that changed everything. Owen closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. Bridget Vallory, I know we haven't known each other long, but I've come to love you with a depth that surprises me daily. You've brought light back into our lives, mine and the boys, and I cannot imagine a future without you in it. He knelt before her, still holding her hands. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife and a mother to Samuel and Thomas? Tears sprang to her eyes. Yes, Owen, yes, with all my heart. He stood, drawing her into an embrace, and finally, his lips met hers in a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and companionship. When they parted, both were smiling through tears of joy. The boys will be ecstatic, Owen said, keeping her close. Samuel already informed me that a mother is their Christmas wish, she laughed. Then we shouldn't disappoint them, he replied. What do you think of a Christmas wedding, small, just family and close friends? That sounds perfect. A thought occurred to her. But what about my teaching position? I've only just begun. The town council won't want to lose you, Owen assured her. Married teachers aren't unheard of, especially in frontier towns where qualified educators are scarce, and if they object, well, he grinned. I happen to know the sheriff. Bridget laughed, happiness bubbling through her. I love you, Owen Hawkins. And I love you, Bridget Vallory, soon to be Hawkins. They sealed the promise with another kiss as snow continued to fall outside, covering Fort Lyon in a blanket of white that seemed to herald a fresh start for them all. Word of their engagement spread through Fort Lyon faster than the winter wind. Mrs. Peterson was delighted, having foreseen the match from the first day. Mayor Danvers, while initially concerned about losing the schoolteacher, was persuaded to allow Bridget to continue teaching after her marriage, a progressive decision that set tongues wagging but ultimately met with approval. The twins were overjoyed, as expected. Thomas immediately started calling Bridget Ma in private, while Samuel peppered her with questions about whether they would have a baby brother or sister soon, questions that made both adults blush, but secretly hope for a positive answer in the future. December brought preparations for both the Christmas pageant and the wedding. The church ladies, led by Mrs. Peterson, took charge of decorating the sanctuary, while Rosa planned a feast for the wedding supper to be held at the Hawkins home. One evening, a week before the wedding, Bridget sat in the Hawkins sitting room with a special package on her lap. The twins watched eagerly as she unwrapped the cloth bundle. "I told you both about my brother's wooden horse and soldier," she began. "I thought it was time you met them." She revealed two well-worn wooden figures, a chestnut horse with a flowing mane and a Union soldier in a faded blue uniform. Despite their age, the craftsmanship was evident, though different from Owen's style. "They're smaller than Pa's," Thomas observed, carefully touching the horse's mane. "They are," Bridget agreed. "They were made for smaller hands many years ago. My father carved them and my brothers played with them, and now—" She placed them in the twins' hands. "Now they belong to you." "Really?" Samuel's eyes widened. "But they're special to you." "They are," she confirmed. "But family treasures are meant to be passed down, and you're my family now." Thomas looked up at her with shining eyes. "Like our soldier and horse that Pa made." "Exactly. Someday you might pass these on to your own children, along with the ones your father made." That's how family stories continue. Owen, watching from the doorway, felt his heart swell at the scene. Bridget hadn't been able to bear children of her own, yet here she was, mothering his sons with such natural grace and love. She caught his eye and smiled, and he knew with absolute certainty that the Christmas miracle he'd stopped believing in years ago had found them after all. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, with sunlight glinting off fresh snow. The church, decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, filled quickly with well-wishers. Owen stood at the altar, Samuel and Thomas at his side in new suits, all three looking nervous and excited. When Bridget appeared at the church doors on the arm of Mayor Danvers, who had offered to give her away in the absence of male relatives, a hush fell over the congregation. Her dress, a cream-colored confection with lace at the collar and cuffs, had been a gift from the town's ladies. Her chestnut hair was arranged in an elegant twist adorned with small white flowers. As she walked down the aisle, her eyes never left Owen's. The love shining between them was so palpable that several women in the congregation dabbed at tears. The ceremony was simple but moving. When they exchanged vows, Bridget included special promises to Samuel and Thomas, who stood solemnly beside their father. "I vow to love you as my own, to guide you with wisdom and patience, to celebrate your joys and comfort your sorrows, and to honor the memory of the mother who loved you first." There wasn't a dry eye in the church as the twins embraced her, officially welcoming her into their family before the minister had even pronounced Owen and Bridget man and wife. The wedding supper was a joyous affair, with Rosa outdoing herself on the feast and misses. Peterson providing a wedding cake that the twins declared the best they'd ever tasted. Toasts were made, stories shared, and when Owen finally swept Bridget into a dance in the cleared sitting room, the applause was deafening. Later, after the guests had departed and the twins were tucked into bed with promises of a family Christmas adventure the next day, Owen led his bride to the master bedroom, recently refurbished with new curtains and bedding to mark the fresh start in their lives. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hawkins," he murmured, drawing her into his arms. "It feels like I've always belonged here," she admitted, resting her head against his chest. "With you, with the boys, you have," he agreed. "We just had to find you." As they sealed their union in the most intimate way, Bridget felt the last shadows of her past losses fade away. She had found not just love, but family, the one thing she'd believed forever beyond her reach. Christmas morning brought excited shouts as the twins discovered presents under the small pine tree Owen had cut and set up in the sitting room. New books from Bridget, hand-carved animals from their father, sweets and knitted scarves from Rosa, and various gifts from townspeople who had taken to the idea of adopting the new family. The most special moment came when Samuel and Thomas presented Bridget with their gift, a crude but heartfelt wooden picture frame they had made themselves, containing a charcoal sketch of the four of them that one of the older students had drawn. "So you remember when we became a real family," Thomas explained. "As if I could ever forget," Bridget replied, hugging them both. "This is the best Christmas of my life." "Mine too," Owen said, joining the embrace, "and I think it's just the beginning." He was right. As winter gave way to spring, life settled into a rhythm of contentment for the Hawkins family. Bridget continued teaching, coming home each afternoon to help the twins with their lessons and assist Rosa with dinner preparations. Evenings were spent reading aloud, playing games, or listening to Owen play the harmonica while the boys attempted to dance. By summer, Bridget had news that completed their happiness against all medical predictions. She was expecting a child. The town celebrated alongside them with Mrs. Peterson organizing a quilting bee to create a special blanket for the baby, and Owen's fellow lawmen taking on extra duties to ensure he could be home more during Bridget's pregnancy. The twins were ecstatic about becoming big brothers, engaging in lengthy debates about whether they wanted a sister or another brother. Thomas thought a sister would be nice, as she wouldn't compete with them, while Samuel was firmly in favor of another boy to even the numbers in the family. In early February of 1874, just as winter tightened its grip on Colorado once more, Bridget gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named Charles Daniel Hawkins, honoring her brother's memories. The twins, initially hoping for a playmate, were surprisingly tender with their tiny brother, taking their duties as older siblings very seriously. "We'll teach him everything," Samuel declared, watching the baby sleep in his cradle. "How to ride, how to fish, how to carve wood like Pa." "And how to read," Thomas added, always the more scholarly of the two. "He's going to be smart like Ma." Bridget, overhearing from her recovery bed, felt her heart might burst with love for these boys who had accepted her so completely. Owen, sitting beside her, squeezed her hand. "Happy?" He asked softly. "Beyond words," she replied. "I never thought I'd have this, a husband who loves me, children who call me Ma, a purpose in teaching, a home that truly feels like home." "You deserve all of it and more," he assured her. "When I think about how close I came to not accepting the sheriff's position here, how easily our paths might never have crossed." "But they did," she reminded him, "because of two boys fighting over a wooden soldier." "And a brave woman who knew just the story to soothe them," Owen added, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Our story. The first of many," Bridget promised, looking toward the twins who were now whispering grand plans for adventures with their brother once he was old enough. "A lifetime of stories for our family," and so it proved to be. Over the years, the Hawkins family grew and thrived in Fort Lyon. Bridget continued teaching until the birth of their second child, a daughter they named Caroline Rose, after which she focused on educating her own children and occasionally tutoring students with special needs. Samuel and Thomas grew into fine young men, different in temperament but united in their love for their family. Samuel followed in his father's footsteps, eventually becoming a deputy before striking out to establish law in a new settlement further west. Thomas, quieter and more thoughtful, discovered a talent for medicine and trained as a doctor, returning to serve Fort Lyon and surrounding communities. Little Charles and Caroline grew up hearing the story of the wooden soldier and horse, of twin brothers who fought and made peace, and of a schoolteacher who found her way home across half a continent to a family waiting for her without even knowing it. And on quiet evenings when the house was still and the children asleep, Bridget would often find Owen in his workshop, carefully carving toys for their grandchildren, horses and soldiers and dolls and more, each one a testament to the love that had built their family, piece by piece, story by story, heart by heart. Their love story, born in the wilderness of the American West, continued to be told through generations of Hawkins' descendants, a reminder that even in the harshest landscapes, love could take root and flourish, creating a legacy that withstood the test of time. In the golden light of their 50th anniversary celebration, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, Bridget whispered to Owen, "Who would have thought that a wooden soldier could build such an empire?" "Not an empire," he corrected, his blue eyes still bright though framed by wrinkles. "A family, the only empire worth having." And as they watched Samuel's grandsons playing with the original wooden horse and soldier, now family heirlooms handled with reverent care, they knew that the greatest story they had created was the one that would continue long after they were gone. The story of the Hawkins family, begun with two brothers fighting over a toy and the woman whose story of her own brothers helped them find peace, and in doing so, helped them all find love.